In this Strategy Unscripted episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Rebecca Olsson. Rebecca is someone who has extensive experience, especially within the financial services industry, working in corporate development and strategy at places such as UBS, Goldman Sachs, and further financial institutions around the world. In this Strategy Unscripted conversation, we explored the importance of connecting corporate and group level strategy work to business units, but also to the teams that sit within those businesses, to the teams that sit in functions, ultimately in order to ensure effective execution. Hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you for the next one. So Rebecca, really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and have a chat, and really appreciate the opportunity to dig into a little bit of your extensive expertise and also your insights on the industry and strategy and some other topics as well. So perhaps just to start with, it would be fantastic, because you do have such a depth of expertise, if you just take us through a little bit about your background.
My career, majority in financial services, so some of the largest banks in the world. And I've also spent 6-7 years in technology companies and have had global roles across. So have seen different cultures and different ways of working and different stressors in different ways in different places. My roles have predominantly been within strategy and transformation, sometimes the same, coupled in the same, and sometimes only on strategy, focusing on transformation, or transformation only. So that's mainly my experience.
And firstly, it's, as I was saying, great to have the opportunity to dig into that and to leverage such a wealth of expertise and knowledge that you've built. You were touching on strategy and transformation there, and we were discussing previously that strategy is such a often used term, but also such a broadly used term that means many different things to many different people, and also can mean nothing to some people as well within organizations. So to you, based upon your experience, what does strategy really mean? What role does it play for an organization?
So I think strategy for me is very much about setting the overall direction of where either the company wants to go, or the business line wants to go, or business unit wants to go. And I think, and that can be a vision or a mission, as we often describe it. And I sometimes feel that strategy for a lot of people, they think of it as something sitting on an ivory tower that someone else is sort of designing, but they don't see, or they don't see how it is applicable to their organization. For me, the key in strategy is how does the overall vision and where the organization wants to go, how is that linked into operationalizing that strategy, and how does an organization stay with that strategy, to stay with the sort of the North Star while they're working through the strategy, and don't lose sight of that strategy. One can always revise strategy, one can revise outcome based on new information, but it's about having that kind of guiding star to focus the organization towards.
And I think often from the outside with organizations that we work with, or just looking across different industries, I don't mean it as a critique, but often for organizations, strategy can look like something that they need to tick a box on. So the board asks for the strategy, or private equity asks for the strategy, or the management team asks for the strategy, or the individuals below ask for a strategy. They want to know where they're going. But often because of the box that needs to be ticked, here's the strategic plan, we've developed it, that's where we're going, that's taken care of for another year. Whereas actually the true need is understanding in a realistic but inspirational way, where are we going, and then how do we get there? How have you seen that organizations can overcome the challenges of box ticking, so to speak, and instead turn strategy into something which is living, breathing, inspirational, aspirational, and owned by people in the organization?
I think it's very much about making the strategy relatable to the organization, and this is where a little bit coming back to that ivory tower. When you use language that doesn't sit well with the organization, if the individual that works in in finance or somewhere that is supporting the organization but perhaps not driving the strategy of the organization, if they don't understand the words that are being used, then when they show up at work every day, they're not going to think about the strategy. They're going to think about their immediate task at hand. So I think it's about making the strategy relatable, and also making sure the strategy has the right information to support the strategy. Often, back to the box ticking exercise, you can create a strategy with a one-slide PowerPoint, putting 5 bullets down, making very generic statements of where the company should be in 3 to 5 years, what customers, what products, etc. But if it's not anchored in where the company is today, and if you can't articulate that journey of today vis-a-vis where the company wants to go, then it's very difficult to actually make that operational in the company, and then the people that work in the company or the areas that need to support the strategy won't be able to see how they can fit in and how they can actually support the strategy.
And I would imagine that's especially challenging in behemoth-style organisations such as you've worked within and worked for, when the ship is so big that just to steer it and turn it in any direction by 1 degree left or right is a huge challenge.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, exactly that. You have big financial institutions. They have many different product lines, customer lines.
Heavily regulated as well.
And heavily regulated. But it's often a tension in the business where you have customer share, you have wallet share, you have product share, you have market share. And that naturally will pull senior leadership in different directions. And from my experience, the key is making sure and that alignment on the top level exists for the strategy. And it's about making it clear of what the benefits are and what the opportunities are for those individuals in that senior leadership team. Often strategies fail if there's only one element of the leadership team that supports it, but others are not quite behind it, or they don't quite see the value of it. And so it is really important in those types of organizations, and I would say most organizations, to have the top level agreement so that they can fully support and be active in that support and called on to create that support in the organization as time moves on.
And I'm really interested to know your viewpoint, because within strategic work for an organization, and generally for a larger organization, there are options, right? You can do it internally, you can have it owned by just a couple of people, you could do it internally and try and involve the wider organization. There could be an internal strategy consultant. There are so many different options that have benefits but also drawbacks. How have you found within organizations before navigating that, understanding what's best to utilize in terms of outside help or doing it purely internally? Because it's a challenge, right?
I think it depends a little bit on the number of people and the time internally and the knowledge internally. Sometimes it is better to go externally to get that fresh viewpoint in, and also the appropriate and allocated time to actually focus on the work. You still, even if you use external, you will always need to use internal to make sure you have the right understanding of where the organization is and the information that you need. So I've seen it,
I suppose.
And ownership. Yes, exactly. So I've seen it work in both cases, but it depends a little bit on where, as you said, the sponsorship and the ownership sit, and how well anchored it is in the organization.
So in an instance where the strategic plan is built up here, and let's say we align the management team, whether it's involving outside help, whether it's done internally, there's then often a big, I was going to say gap, but it's probably more like a chasm that can exist between the top level management and the strategic plan, the overriding direction of the corporate or the overriding direction of the business unit or department, and the individuals who then actually have to execute, the individuals on the ground who are going to be doing the doing. So how have you managed that bridging of that chasm, the bridging of that gap, to involve and build ownership and build responsibility within the layer down there? For me, it's about making sure there is a clear link between the senior management and the individuals doing the work.
And it's a little bit what I alluded to before, is that if it's anchored up here, then it's key that these individuals spend time educating, as well as supporting and listening to the individuals that will be executing, to make sure that the individuals that execute understand that they're supported and they understand this vision. But also when people over time, other challenges come in, that need to be worked on, that they also get feedback and input onto how to prioritize this piece of work. At the end of the day, it is absolutely clear that the overall sponsor and the sort of the executive or your senior management is fully supportive of this strategy, and it's not a one communication. Back to your tick boxing. It's not a PowerPoint that says, this is what we're going to do, I'll follow up with you in 2 years. It's about staying involved when they're needed, but also to support and to re-inform, to realign the message and support the teams that are implementing.
And I'd imagine having that feedback function is equally important, because just because we set the strategy now in, let's say, 2024, and we've got that plan moving forward to 2029, the market changes, things change out there. Things, over the course of just this past weekend that we've had, will significantly change the market, most likely. And organisations need to adapt as a result of that, and understand, where do we push more, where do we focus more, where do we double down, and which areas do we potentially need to stop. So building that feedback function, I imagine, isn't easy, but how have you implemented that or tried to implement that in the past, maybe in some of your roles?
So I think, it is always a challenge. And I do think exactly what you said. Things change, and it's about making sure, and this is where a lot of things can go wrong, if the program of work or the book of work that has taken the strategy to then implement, if they're not aware of the changes that are happening outside, then they're going to continue on one path, whereas the organization as a whole might feel over time that that path is not the correct path. So it's important to stay close, and it's important for the areas that have the sort of the oversight of these other elements or other challenges that are coming in, that they are on top of it, and that they can to discuss that with the teams and make sure that either we reevaluate, we stop, we refocus, we stop that. I have seen big programs go very wrong and waste a lot of time and a lot of money because that didn't happen. Where a strategy has been set, the stakeholders all agreed the strategy with the teams. They set the team off. The team went off to deliver. A few years later, because that's how long these programs went on, they hadn't gotten the deliveries that they were expecting. And the world had changed. Suddenly, ownership had changed. Suddenly, other regulators had come in. And there was a stark realization that what has been delivered was nowhere near what was needed for the new organization they were in. But no one had connected this part with this program. So they spent over 100 million euros and had not delivered nearly, I would say, 10% of what they needed to do.
And it comes on to a point that you also made earlier about the ivory tower and the role that can play and the drawback of that sometimes. But there have been various academic papers and various books written recently about the idea that we're moving into an age of distributed strategy. So we're moving to an age where we're moving away from a couple of key individuals within an organisation who lock themselves in a room, write the strategy, and then, yes, perhaps connect it to the rest of the organisation, but they give it to them. And we're moving in the direction of a distributed strategy or distributed contribution where people on the front lines, people who are client-facing, people who are supplier-facing, people who are, as we said earlier, doing the doing, are actually contributing to the development of the strategy as well. Is that something that you saw in the past or less so, and just interested to know your thoughts on it?
I haven't seen it as much in financial services, I would say. I've seen it more in tech companies, where people are more out delivering towards their clients, and they will naturally have a lot more of that input, and they will naturally have more information on how the market is developing and what they're seeing as changing within their sort of the client group. But yeah, I definitely think there's more work to be done, and I think it's a positive development as long as someone is still sitting with different pieces to see how they all fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move into a little section where I want to talk more about the future of strategic work and technology, just wanted to touch upon one other big pain point that we often see, which I'm interested to know your viewpoint on, which is the disconnect between strategy and budget. Because the two within companies should really fit together, because you have your strategic plan, and off the back of that you should develop forward. But so often it seems that there's the budget, there's the strategy, the two almost run in parallel, but they don't really connect. But also from day one of the budget, generally things have changed, generally we need to make adaptations, and it doesn't really take into account what we're trying to do over here in our strategic plan. So is that also something you've seen and experienced, that disconnect? Is it a pain point that is really vivid and out there?
Yes and no. So I think there's definitely a disconnect. So I would agree with that. I think where the challenge is as you said, one does need to reprioritize and one does need to change. Probably where the gaps are is that the assessments aren't necessarily done in the beginning, that of all the areas that need to be involved and all, advisors or what have you that need to be bought in to deliver on the strategy. A lot of those things can come as the sort of understanding of the strategy and what needs to be done develops, and then it's important to quickly be able to have those discussions and get agreement on what is that spend and where is it going to come from. I've seen a lot of cases where companies will say, yes, of course we should spend 2 million on this, but no one really answers, but where is that 2 million going to come from, and what will need to be reprioritized for that 2 million to be freed up so we can spend it on this. It's very easy for people to say, of course we should focus on that, but not really have the consequence and the impact of, and then how do we make that happen? So I think that's definitely a gap.
And it's what you actually touched upon there fits in perfectly with the question I was about to ask and move on to, because so often when we talk about strategy, I'm actually keen, and we're actually keen to not use the word strategy, because it is so broad. It does mean so many different things to different people, and it's quite airy-fairy sometimes.
Yeah.
So we've often discussed internally that actually strategy, and it's what you just touched upon then, is really about giving individuals and giving organisations the confidence, and I think confidence is a key word, but the confidence to make data-driven and fact-based decisions that ultimately significantly increase the probability of success. You can never say with 100% certainty that anything will happen or not, but significantly increase the probability of success and give them the confidence of that. And as you said, it's the confidence to say, well, if we are spending 2 million on this, where's the return coming from? If we are investing 100 million to go in this direction, why? What's the data-driven fact-based analysis and insight that's leading us towards that decision? With the age that we're moving into now, and I'm not saying that we're at the start of the technology age, but with the incredible increase in speed of the advent of technology in spaces such as strategy work, do you think that will now play a big part moving forward, driven by people still, but leveraging specific technology, leveraging specific platforms in order to deliver that type of work?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I think, it was alluded to previously, it's, a lot of companies live on PowerPoints, a lot of companies still live on Excel, and then they're reinventing the wheel every time they want to redesign, reevaluate, or do something new. I think if there's a way to collect information, and back to the point about having sort of more data-driven and more more individuals involved to create that strategy. If there's a way to do that in one place, then I think that would be very valuable. And it's also about then taking that vision about investing 100 over here, for instance, and that will yield this gain, or we hope it's going to yield this gain, that's our plan, to be able to also track it over time. Are we staying on course? Has our assumptions become real, or have we learned something new along the delivery process that we need to reevaluate, and perhaps we need to divert the strategy slightly in this direction, and that is going to yield a better result. But it's having that input and that buy-in and that information that will help that, and that way also make it more transparent to the organization of why changes are happening, why decisions are changing, and so on.
And as someone who has sat in that chair within truly large-scale organisations and had the ownership and responsibility and pressure of leading this type of work and taking this type of decisions, I'm just very interested to know, as much as you can tell me, what were the real pains of that type of work for you? What were the, laying in bed at night staring at the ceiling thinking, how do I get that done, or what if that goes wrong? What were the challenges for you in that type of role?
Yeah, I think the main challenge is back to do people in the organization, do they understand the why? Do they understand why we set on this direction? And how do we make sure we keep that momentum and keep that understanding? Because in very big organizations, there is always going to be something else that comes along. And it is about how do we keep everyone along the same path and motivated. A lot of times things come along, people splinter off into different directions, and it's how do we get them back into this direction.
And I imagine in your type of role, the challenge within that is that above you, there are expectations to be managed, and there's been a commitment to strategic plan. Below, there's a commitment, but as you said, when fires are burning here or when something's happening over there, people splinter off. They don't contribute to overrunning strategy, and that means that when reporting up, there perhaps are certain areas that haven't been executed upon or haven't been committed to as much, and it's about managing that.
Yeah, or understood. Yeah.
And just lastly, last couple of points to talk through, you were saying there that you want people to understand the why. And I would imagine you don't just want people to understand the why because you want people to know why. You want them to understand the why so that they have real ownership and commitment and confidence in what is happening.
Yeah.
Do you think that the shift towards using specific technologies or specific approaches can support with that? Or do you think it is more of a human problem or more of a human challenge to be solved to get people to really buy into the strategy?
Well, I think it's both. I think the tools that are being developed, I think they will absolutely help with ensuring that understanding and that alignment and that purpose is in the organization. Otherwise, it becomes less factual, perhaps, and more subjective. If I sit and tell you, this is why we're doing it, and you can say to me, well, I don't agree with that, I don't understand how you came up with that. If you have a tool set that supports the information that has created the why, it would be an easier dialogue and an easier understanding. And I think it's absolutely important that the individuals that you're trying to get, to support the strategy, also understand how they link into that strategy. And back to the ownership, how they've supported that strategy. How can they see their part in the delivery of that strategy and feel purpose with being a part of this strategy development and implementation?
And selfishly, from my standpoint, I would just like to know, if you were able to put yourself in your shoes, but 10 years ago or 8 years ago, or however many years that may be, what would you have wanted to know then in those type of roles, delivering the type of work that we've discussed for large, ambitious, fast-moving and growing organisations? what would you go back and tell yourself, or what were some of the areas that you'd like more insight in if you could go back and have that conversation?
Definitely the data side of it. So there's a lot of really good ideas and good gut feelings out there. But what's often lacking, I feel, is that data side to really show this is why we think we need to go in this direction or in this direction. And yeah, I've definitely missed that both in the technology companies I've worked in and the financial services companies I've worked in. And I've seen examples where the exec level are very much behind an approach or a change in business strategy or business offering, but they can't really get off to really start that change because there's still some uncertainty in that decision. But it's often not articulated as an uncertainty and a direct approach to say, let's find out this information. Let's do a cost-income ratio. Let's see where the marketplace is. Is our gut accurate, given if we get more information to kind of validate and get that gut? And it's when those types of things are done that you can actually get that comfort that you're heading in the right direction and that you can make that decision. And I think it's the gap between the gut feel sometimes and the real information. And when those aren't connected, it's really hard to get off the starting block.
And you use the word comfort, and I would equate that to the word we used earlier, which is confidence. Ultimately, what people, teams, organizations are building is, as you said, comfort and confidence in their decisions.
Yeah.
And that can initially come from your gut feel, but unless you've done something again and again and again and again, and often that's not the case because, as we said, industries change, organizations change, there are different challenges, you need to, or it would be more effective to support that gut instinct with the confidence that comes from data, the confidence that comes from market research, industry research, and so on.
And I think, as we said, things can change also once you have made those decisions. But as long as there is information that can be put into the process to reevaluate and sometimes realign or just reaffirm, then that will give that confidence to the organization to keep going.
Well, look, we've covered quite a few topics, and I don't want to take too much of your time today. But really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and speak, and also to have the opportunity to learn so much from your wealth of experience and your wealth of knowledge within strategy work, transformation work, and a variety of different industries as well. So really appreciate the time. Thank you for your insights as well, and look forward to speaking more.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.